Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips, episode 282, and today's title is Speaking Short and Sweet. Speaking short and sweet. We're going to explore the value of the discipline of learning how to speak succinctly, how to make longer lessons shorter in a way that is still meaningful. This idea comes from a recent experience I had. My wife Penny and I were off on a Bible study tour with our good old friend Douglas Jacoby and about 30 people. We were traveling, following the journey of the Apostle Paul on his way to meet Caesar in Acts chapter 28, from Malta to Sicily to the mainland of Italy and up to Rome. Doug asked me as part of the journey if I would do a daily devotional for the group. We were often on coaches, traveling significant distances, and I said, fine. And then he surprised me by saying, they need to be 90 seconds long. 90 seconds. And I thought he was joking. How can I do something meaningful as a devotional in 90 seconds? But he was not joking. And so I took it on as a creative challenge. Can I do something that's spiritually meaningful in 90 seconds? Is it possible? Now, before I go into the details of what I actually did and how it turned out, I would just like to say one thing as a caveat. I'm not suggesting that shorter is always better. In Luke chapter 3, verse 18, it says, with many other words, Luke exhorted the people and proclaimed the good news to them. Many other words, not a few. Also in Acts chapter 2, when Peter is preaching, it says, with many other words, he warned them, he pleaded with them, save yourselves from this corrupt generation. Many other words. Indeed, in Acts chapter 20, he traveled through that area talking about Paul, speaking many words of encouragement to the people, and finally arrived in Greece. It doesn't look like the Sermon on the Mount was a short lesson. So in other words, I'm not suggesting that it's always best to be short. I'm not suggesting there is a formula for speaking that is always going to be shorter rather than longer. But what I am suggesting is that all speakers should master the art of speaking long, speaking medium, and speaking short. And most of us are going to be better at one of those than the other. Perhaps you're excellent at the short stuff, and I'd like to know your thoughts on what I'm saying here today. And you're not so good at speaking longer and keeping people engaged and expanding on a point in greater depth. Or perhaps it's the opposite. I don't know. For you, you know. But all speakers, as we grow and learn, should master all lengths and formats of speaking. And in my experience, speaking for myself, but also the people I know, I think that we find it more difficult to speak short than long. So if that's you, then I hope these thoughts today will be useful. First of all, I'll share the format that I decided on for what became called Malcolm's Minutes in these devotionals. So I followed a 5-step format. Trying to keep each bit brief. Firstly, context, and that's the why. Why am I going to talk about this? Why is it important? Secondly, the verse, just one verse each time, sometimes only a phrase from the verse. Thirdly, the main point, what's this really all about? Fourthly, an illustration to illustrate the point, obviously a short one. And fifthly, an application, something like, this might apply to you in this way, might apply in that way. How about putting this into practice in this way? So context, verse, main point, illustration, and application. And of course, in 90 seconds, that doesn't give you long for each of those. So you've got to go bang, 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 not speaking too quickly. That's not the goal here, but just clearly and succinctly. In other words, leaving the group wanting more. Isn't that the goal? Leave people wanting more. Now, my experience of working on these, and I worked on them before we went away, and I worked on them while we were away, and I took feedback from Doug and others in terms of what they felt was helpful whilst we were on the journey. But my experience was this. Number one, it's hard. It's really hard to say something meaningful in 90 seconds or less. The second thing I learned was to practice the timing. This becomes particularly significant when you are trying to speak more in a shorter format. Practice the timing. My first Malcolm's Minute was, I think, 2.5 minutes long, wasn't a minute and a half. And Doug's feedback to me afterwards was, practice it. So I did that. I'm not sure, I didn't time all of them. I'm not sure how many of them came in at exactly 90 minutes. Some of them definitely went a little over, but none of them were 5 minutes. they were somewhere between 90 seconds and maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Practicing the timing becomes more important when you're speaking in a short format. The other thing I learned was how gratifying it was that people asked me for more. It was a lovely feeling to be asked for more. People asked me about, what's the next one about? When's that coming? Is it tomorrow morning on the coach? They were looking forward to it. And much as sometimes people have appreciated longer lessons I've given, I have to say that I've had more affirmation, if that's the right word, about my shorter lessons in general than my longer ones. And maybe that's a lesson for me and others. And the other thing I learned and noticed was that people could repeat back to me the main point. Later that day, or even the next day, they come up to me and said, I wonder what the next minute's going to be about. I liked yesterday's when you talked about Paul being a servant or Paul being a man of prayer. They remembered it. There is something about the shorter lessons that seems to be easier for people to remember and retain, and that's a large part of why we teach and preach, isn't it? So, to conclude, the goal is not to fill the time. The goal is to fill the mind and the heart with enough for people to chew on themselves. You've chewed over what you're going to say. You're not then supposed to give them everything so they have to chew over everything you had to chew over. It's more that they need something. People who are listening need something that will touch their hearts, touch their mind, and give them something they can chew over. That's the goal, not to fill the time as such. Secondly, bear in mind that most of Jesus' parables were short. Read any of them, even the longest ones. They'll be over in just a few minutes. And many of them can be read in a minute or two. And even if you expand on them, the basic points, it should only take a short time. So if Jesus could and did speak short, it's something we should be good at. And my thought would be to experiment. Experiment with how short can you go? How short could you make your next lesson and still make it meaningful? Why not experiment? Give yourself a goal. If you normally speak for 30 minutes, go for 20. If you normally speak for 20, go for 15 or 10. What can you do? Yes, you won't get it right all the time. Yes, you'll leave some things out you thought you should put in. But why not have that goal? Give it a go. So those are the thoughts for today. Short and sweet is sometimes what is needed, isn't it? There is value in the learning the discipline of being able to speak more briefly, because Jesus did that, and because sometimes that's what people need, especially if they're tired, if it's hot, if they've had a big lunch. Speaking a long lesson is not going to go down well, and it's not going to achieve God's purpose, is it, for his word? What do you think about this idea of speaking short and sweet? Leave me a comment if you wouldn't mind. Leave it wherever you hear or see this recording. Then we can learn from each other, and we learn best when we're learning in the community. If you know anybody who might benefit from this, please pass the link on if you haven't already done so. Comment, subscribe, hit the notification button. If you've got any questions, drop me an email, malcolm@malcolmcox.org. If you'd like a free copy of my ebook on spiritual disciplines, how God grows his people, sign up for my newsletter at the website, malcolmcox.org. Hope you found this helpful. Hope it was short enough and sweet enough. Till the next time, keep calm and carry on teaching. God bless.